And hello, I'm Mark Pinto, Adult Services Director at Phoenixville Public Library, and welcome to tonight's program on understanding and dealing with identity theft, a crime that perpetrators seem to have an endless variety of ways of carrying out. And I was thinking, if those same people would spend the same amount of energy in doing something more productive and positive, the world would be a much better place. We're grateful to have with us tonight an advocate for crime victims in Chester County, Grace Harvey. She's Prevention Education Specialist with the Crime Victims Center of Chester County. Grace, welcome, and thanks for taking the time to speak to our patrons tonight. Take it away.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Great. Yeah. Hey, everybody. Like Mark said, thank you for that intro. My name is Grace. And I wonder if anyone has ever heard of the Crime Victims Center before. If you have, you can, raise your hand or just pop it in the chat. Okay, cool. Some people haven't. So that's great. Yeah, some people have. Awesome. So I'll tell you all about who we are, just so you know, because we are a resource to you all in Chester County. And so I really want to make sure that you know what we have to offer for you all. Okay. So before we get started, I will also say that if you have any questions during this program, please feel free to unmute, raise your hand, type it in the chat, save them for later. However you want to interact tonight is totally cool with me. I welcome you to keep your camera on if you like, but I also understand wanting to not. So however you want to interact tonight is a-okay with me. All right. So we'll go ahead and get started, and I'll tell you a little bit about where I come from. So the Crime Victims Center of Chester County is Chester County's victim advocacy agency. Every county, or almost every county in Pennsylvania, has one of these. And there's pretty much one of what we do in every state. But we are Chester County's victim services agency. So what we do is for free. We offer counseling, advocacy, different resources, and education, which is my job, for anyone in the county. So we go around and we do education stuff like I'm doing tonight. But we also go to schools. I'm going to virtually next week do a school for internet safety. So we do different programs like that. If you were ever interested in having a type of program that might involve different things like what we're talking about tonight, or other ways of preventing harm and crime, you can always reach out to us. But the bigger thing that we do, well, it's not bigger, but a large portion of what we do is we advocate for victims of crime and their families. We offer them support. We go with folks if they have to go to the police, to the hospital, to court for something that may have happened to them. And so our hotline is on the screen here. We have a 24/7 free hotline. It's totally confidential. And so that's a really cool resource for you all to know. Even in Phoenixville, right, our office is located in Westchester, but we serve everyone across Chester County. We serve folks in Phoenixville all the time. And so we're here for you too. If anything ever happened and you were thinking, this happened a while ago, I kind of want to talk about it, you could call us at any time. Or if you were like, this thing happened, I kind of want to ask some questions and know my options and figure out what to do next. We are here for you. And Nancy asked in the chat, does Delco have CVC? This is a great question. So not all of them are called CVC. There's a couple different names that folks go by, but Delaware County absolutely does have one. And if you want, at the end, I can look up their information and get that to you. But they do. There's also a group called Delco War. War is an organization that also exists in Philly and does similar things to us. Does a lot of work around sexual assault victims. And so there's also resources for domestic violence centers too. So yeah, any questions, go ahead and ask me and I can connect you with those folks. But that's what we do at CVC. Just wanted to spend a few minutes making sure you know about us. And thanks for asking the question in the chat, Nancy. If anyone has any more, go ahead and ask. But we'll go ahead and get started. I figure we would start today off with a funny little comic. This says, Tiger, I think you're a victim of identity theft. There are thousands of cats with the same name as you. This is an old one that we've used for a few years now. It's been passed down. I just figured we would kind of start this off a little bit lighthearted, not because identity theft isn't super serious, because it totally is, and we'll get into that. But it's also important for you to know that talking about crime and harm can be difficult. For some of you, this might not be really hard to think about or talk about, but for others, this might have impacted you personally or just be hard for you to think about. So I want you to know that tonight I will keep things as lighthearted as possible and just get you some really good information and ask any questions you have. I also just want to let you know that if anything comes up for you, if this is a little bit hard for you to deal with tonight, feel free to take care of yourself, do whatever you got to do. Okay, and thanks, Mark, for putting the Delco Victim Assistance Center in there. Yeah, they all have like kind of a similar name, but not all of them are CBC. All right. So let's get started. Our agenda for today, what we are going to be talking about. We're going to talk about the basis of what identity theft is. Kind of seems like a broad concept. So we're just going to talk about what even is identity theft? What does that mean? Then I'm going to get into how does it happen? How is this crime perpetrated? And like Mark said, people have found a lot of different ways to commit identity theft. So we'll go over a few of them. There's probably some that maybe we don't even know about yet, but we'll go over some of the ones that are popular right now. Then we'll talk about who this affects, who is vulnerable to identity theft, what population should be worrying about this or should be aware of it. And then lastly, we will end with some takeaways of things that everyone can do to try and protect themselves, to minimize the risk of this happening to you or to people you care about. Hopefully, I can also leave you with some things to share with your family and friends. I know I learned a lot about identity theft going through and researching this for tonight myself, and I've definitely shared that with others. So hoping that this will be some knowledge that you can spread around. And I'll also leave you with some resources in case this ever happens to you or someone close to you. All right. So if all that sounds good, we will start off with talking about what is identity theft. Identity theft is simply when someone uses someone's personal information to commit fraud. So personal information might be things like account numbers, driver's license, health insurance card, social security number. But this also could include things like obtaining personal information such as pieces of mail, the address or phone number, or even just first and last name of somebody. Anything that could be personal information about somebody, if there's enough of it, could be something that someone might use to commit fraud. And so when I'm talking about committing fraud, this looks like a couple different things. So somebody might use someone's personal information to commit fraud by making purchases, right? And so this could be someone simply having someone's account information, like an online shop, maybe an Amazon account information, something like that, and making purchases that way. It could also be if someone had someone's bank information, using their money to buy things. This could also be if someone obtained someone's credit card or debit card or something like that and used that to make purchases that of course are fraudulent, right? Because it's not that person's information. It's not that person's account. Another form that it might take is through using credit. So folks who are committing identity theft may use someone's personal information to, one, start a line of credit, right? Take out a completely new credit card under someone else's information. They might also just use someone's existing credit card or line of credit to purchase things. But this also could be things that use a lot of someone's credit and might need a high credit score to buy. Someone using that when it's not their own, right? So for example, if somebody was taking out a loan in someone else's name or things like that, we often hear stories, you may have heard stories of identity theft that goes on where somebody has something like a loan taken out in their name that doesn't belong to them, or a credit card taken out in their name. But I feel like we all have probably also experienced those times when you look at your credit card statement and you're like, wait, what was that? Oh, right, that's when I bought this thing, right? But sometimes you kind of do that double check. That is because we know that sometimes credit is a way that folks commit fraud and commit identity theft. Okay, next is tax and unemployment. Okay, this might look like somebody filing a fraudulent tax return with someone else's information, stealing someone's tax return, right? If they get like a refund or something like that. This could also be things like taking someone else's unemployment check, or acting as if you were somebody else who might be unemployed, or registering with someone else's information to obtain money or services that way. Because we know that there are a lot of different government services and ways that we can receive help through things like unemployment. And there would be some people who might commit identity theft by getting someone else's information and submitting it that way. And Nancy adds in the chat, check statements every month. You got it, Nancy. You're already on the ball. And we'll go over things like that a little bit later, because that's definitely one way that we can try and keep our eye on possible suspicious activity, or ways that we can try and prevent identity theft. Okay, so there might be purchases, there might be things involving credit. There also might be fraud, including taxes and unemployment. Another one could be through medical services. So somebody might obtain medical services using someone else's information, but they might also file false medical insurance claims. And so that might mean that somebody was getting insurance money for something that didn't happen to them, or using fraudulent personal information. Okay, so obviously those are not all of the ways that this happens. We'll get into a couple ones that are, I don't want to say trendy, but we see a higher trend in these happening in the past year. But before I move on, does anyone have any questions or comments about these different forms identity theft might take? And I'll just leave a second. All right, if anything comes up, feel free to pop them in the chat or unmute. Okay, so believe it or not, when I made this program, it was back in 2021, which I know it's only been a few days of 2022, but it feels funny to think that I made this program last year. But when I was going through and researching this program, I was looking at data from the FBI. Every year does like an annual internet crimes report, and they report on different trends that year in identity theft. And so we're going to go over some hot topics, or things that were coming up a lot when it came to identity theft and internet crimes. And let's see, Nancy says, I feel like unsolicited phone calls are looking so short. Oh, that they're happening so much, you might want to change your phone number. What else can be done? I don't find that the do not call list is working for me. Good question, Nancy. Thank you for asking that. And I'm glad you brought that up, that things like phone calls are also a way that people carry out things like scams. And scamming is a big part of identity theft. Yep, we all get tons of phone calls daily, and it's so annoying. I totally agree. I get so many phone calls that my car's extended warranty is up. And I get them so often that sometimes I actually text my dad and I say, can you just confirm that my car's extended warranty isn't really up? And every time he's like, no, Grace, it's not. I bought my car for cash from somebody in Westchester. um, so this is a good question, and something that comes up a lot are these phone calls. And I hear you that the do not calls do not always work. There are certain settings depending on your phone that can silence spam calls. I have found that this is the best option for me. I know other folks might get calls if you still have like a landline or a home phone, and I'm not super sure what tricks are for that. We can definitely look into it and we can chat a bit later. But if you do have something like an iPhone or a smartphone, there are certain settings that allow you to, or actually the phone itself will silence or send those kind of like to a spam folder, right? It just doesn't send you those calls. That has helped for me. But what I will also do is, there is so much information and so much stuff changing in the world of spamming and identity theft that I'm going to look into that, Nancy, and I can get back in touch with you all later and show you some of the ways that you can change the settings on your phone, because it would just be a little tricky for me to show you over Zoom. But I'll write that down as a concern that we can come back to. Okay. So let's take a look at some of the hot topics that we saw in 2020. And again, this is coming from the FBI, who gathers annual data on this stuff. So of course, COVID-19 definitely impacted things. It impacted everything. It even impacted things involving identity theft. So with COVID-19, of course, we saw things like the CARES Act, where different government officials were rolling out things to support folks. This looked like some of us got relief checks. Some of us may have filed for unemployment and gotten things like that. Other small businesses and places were able to get small loans to help them out when things were locked down. So unfortunately, with all of this stuff also came identity theft and crimes that were going on with people falsely obtaining these loans, pretending that they were small businesses to get loans, or maybe taking that from the small business itself that really was going to get that money. It also looked like fraudsters falsely obtaining things like relief checks that may have came in the mail, and also things like unemployment insurance. Next is one that I have absolutely experienced this past year, which is email compromise. And I wonder how many people on this call have also experienced that. If you work at a job where you email regularly, this might be something that you yourself have dealt with. It's super frustrating. What email compromise is it's a trending way that folks are obtaining personal information. That is through either maybe hacking into or obtaining somebody else's email address, but it also sometimes is just using an email address that looks very similar to an actual person that you might be getting an email from. And with that, folks can obtain different personal information. They might even compromise information from that person's computer, but it could also look like involving other people in gaining things like money or gift cards. So a big example of this is that CVC deals with this all the time. And I know other teachers at schools deal with this, and folks at a lot of different companies have noticed. You may get emails from somebody who says that they're your boss. They might say, "Hey, I am Mark Pinto," and it's like a strange email address. And you're thinking, okay, this isn't Mark's normal email address. This is a little bit weird. And then that person might be saying, "I need you to do me a favor. Can you text me? I got a new phone," right? So things like that, getting someone to think, okay, well, maybe this really is Mark. And so there might be all different types of requests that come from that. But the root of it is that somebody is pretending to be someone, like somebody who works for the Phoenixville Library, messaging you about stuff. And it can be really hard to tell if these people are real or not. Sometimes the email addresses look so similar to that person's actual email But sometimes they also just use some tricks that we're going to talk about later that scammers might use. Tricks that really get you to think maybe this person really is real. Email compromise has happened, like I said, to folks at CVC. One of my coworkers, a fellow educator, Denny, actually started to fall for one of these scams and luckily did not go through with it. But I asked him if I could share the story because I think it's a good example. My coworker, Denny, once got an email from somebody who was claiming to be the CEO of CVC. And we're a pretty tight-knit group. And so, Denny saw this email and was like, okay, the CEO is emailing me and she wants a favor, so I'm going to help her out. And the email kind of was saying, I need you to run to the store and get me some gift cards for clients. I just really need you to do this favor for me. And so Denny was really thinking, okay, well, all right, if the CEO is asking me to do a favor, I'm going to do it. This seems a little weird, but I don't know. Something in Denny finally said, you know what? Let me text our CEO and see if this is real. And it turned out that it was just some random person who had an email that looked a whole lot like our CEO's. And unfortunately, this happens a lot. I've heard this happen to people in my mom's company, into my partner's company. And sometimes folks really do end up going through and buying things like gift cards or sending money and things like that. And unfortunately, this is a big way that fraud was happening recently. And Nancy says there is got a Microsoft Team email to confirm whether I changed my password. Phishing. Absolutely. And that's another great example, right? The emails come from people who seem to be real, right? They might be like, hey, we're from Microsoft. And you might not think twice. I know I don't always think twice. But you're right, Nancy. There's usually something a little bit off about it, about the content or the email. Misspelled words, poor grammar, the email address is weird. Absolutely, you got it, right? When Denny got this email from our CEO, they said, this doesn't sound like how she usually talks, right? It's even like this person doesn't usually use a lot of exclamation points. Something is weird, right? But absolutely, FedEx delivery asking for confirmation. And the thing is, we're going to talk about this later. This stuff is really tricky to sometimes discern what is and isn't real. And so, Nancy, I'm glad that you said there's usually something off. And I'm going to focus a lot on different signs that something is a scam, because unfortunately scams are super common right now. I don't know if they've ever not been common, but they've definitely through email been pretty common this year, this past couple of years. Okay, lastly, and again, this one does have to do with COVID-19 as well. Employment has been shifting and changing. Lots of people have been changing their jobs, looking for more flexible hours. Lots of people may have been just leaving their job and looking for something new or something that's remote. And unfortunately, folks are using this vulnerability or this change in people to create fraudulent employment opportunities. And so this might look like somebody getting a job opportunity that looks really awesome. It pays well. It lets them stay at home and work flexible hours. But unfortunately, these fraudulent employment opportunities will onboard someone and even sometimes go so far as to obtain personal information, bank information from them. And then they're unfortunately left with money being stolen or private information being stolen and finding out that the job opportunity really was not real. And so this one definitely hurts my heart. They all do, but it's a little tough to hear about this one, right? Because it is, it's hard to hear when people really take these vulnerabilities like COVID-19 or unemployment and use those to victimize folks. I think it's important to be aware of these hot topics because they change a lot. And I will give you some resources at the end for websites that can also keep you up to date on common scams happening or common identity theft themes that are going on. But these are some that were happening in 2020. And of course, the FBI will probably come out with ones from 2021 as well. But I would venture to guess that these are probably still going on quite a bit. Okay, So who is impacted by identity theft? Again, this information comes from that FBI annual report. In 2020, there were an average of 20,000 complaints per day. And keep in mind that this includes a whole host of different internet crimes, right? So that might be phishing scams, that might be things like those personal information scams, or big companies being hacked, or even just small people getting those phone calls. So this includes a whole host of different things. But yeah, that is shocking. But also not surprising, because like you all said, those phone calls are so annoying and they come in all the time. Right, and so these numbers are high. There is a total of 4.2 billion in victim losses, and this is just in 2020, right? And so this feels kind of heavy, like the weight and the harm that identity theft brings is pretty significant. And are those complaints to FBI or to the police in general? Good question, Kim. I'm pretty sure that these come through a website where you can report different instances. And so I don't think it's police. It might be a combination. I can double check this for you. But I'm going to show you a website at the end of this where you can go to report stuff if it happens, so that these annual reports can get kept up to date, right? Like the data is helpful. And so folks report these things going on. They might report them to the Federal Trade Commission or to the FBI itself. But honestly, a lot of it probably also goes unreported. Yeah, thanks, Kim. Good question. But yeah, I think it's a combination of a lot of things. But there are methods of reporting that I'll let you know about, because I do think it's important to even be able to have this data. So the question, who is vulnerable to identity theft? The answer is everyone. It is really everyone. And I'm going to show you some different numbers of, again, in 2020, like the difference in age group of how much money was lost and how many people were victimized. But the serious truth of it is that anyone can be vulnerable to this. There are children who unfortunately are victims of identity theft and don't find out until later in their life that maybe credit was taken out in their name. Of course, we hear a lot of stories of the older population being targeted a lot and experiencing higher rates of identity theft victimization, but it truly does happen at every age. Here you can see in this graph, it's not the easiest to read, but the point is just to show you that yes, the numbers do increase as age goes up. However, there's a little bit of difference, right? So from 30 to 39, we see around 88,000 people were victims of identity theft. 50 to 59 has 85. But then we see in the middle, the 40 to 49 has 91,000. And then of course, over 60, we see has the highest rates. And as the age goes up, unfortunately, the cost is higher. The reason I show you this, one, is to show you there definitely are differences in who is victimized and how much cost damage they take. But what I really want you to consider is that nobody is exempt from the harm that this could cause, right? Even folks in their 20s, sure, they may be lower on the spectrum. 70,000 victims a year is still monumental. And so this is something that I think everyone needs to be aware of. Everyone needs to make sure we're letting other people know this isn't just something that happens to older populations. This is something that we all really need to be aware of. And I think that sometimes the narrative gets it wrong, that maybe younger people don't have to think about this stuff too. But like I believe it was Nancy who said earlier, checking your credit score every year is a really important thing to do, or checking your credit card statement every month. And it makes me think about how college students in particular are also uniquely vulnerable, because they might have new lines of credit that they don't check all the time. And so there are different things that factor into different age groups. The point is, it's something that we all should be aware of. So I want to spend a good chunk of time talking about minimizing the risk of identity theft, because I think that a lot of us already know what it is, but what we really want to know are what in the world can we do about this? And before I start talking about how to minimize the risk, I really want to make sure you know that it is no one's fault if they are the victim of a crime, and it's no one's fault if they are the victim of identity theft. And I say this because I know from firsthand experience working with clients who have experienced this, but I also hear it just from living in the world. Oftentimes, people who are victims of identity theft feel a lot of shame, a lot of guilt, and often a lot of embarrassment. And I think this is because a lot of us might believe that if we were smarter, if we knew better, if we made different decisions, maybe this wouldn't happen. And of course, we can always think back and say, man, if I didn't give that person my phone number, maybe this wouldn't have happened. But I really want you to know that there shouldn't be any shame or guilt attached with this, because it is no one's fault if someone chooses to take advantage of them and steal a lot of money from them. Okay, so that is just really important for you to know, that when we talk about how you can minimize the risk, I am not saying that people who have experienced this could have stopped it. They may have, right? But it's still not something they should feel like embarrassed about or guilty about, because the truth is that the way that these scammers work is very calculated, and really takes advantage of people. So I want to make sure everybody knows that when we talk about how to minimize the risk, these are simply things that each of us can do to raise our awareness, to try and minimize that risk, and to try and up the protection factors that we have and up our awareness, so that if these things come across our lives and our paths, which they most likely will, because they probably already have, we can be better equipped to try and stop it before it gets out of hand. Okay, so that is my soapbox moment. But when looking at ways to minimize identity theft happening to you, number one is to keep sensitive documents safe. This sometimes seems like a no-brainer, but sometimes we have to remember that losing your wallet or losing your bag is something that commonly happens, and we want to be careful that we aren't carrying around things that are sensitive, right? Sensitive documents, things like social security cards, birth certificates, things like that. We really don't want to be carrying them around, because that gives a higher chance of them getting lost, getting into the wrong hands, or someone taking them on purpose. Okay, the next one, like Nancy already said, regularly check those financial accounts. If you can do it monthly, that's awesome. If you can get in the habit of it, that's a really good practice. That is because when we check our accounts regularly, we are able to catch suspicious activity much faster than we would if we didn't check them. And so this doesn't mean that you have to check things all the time, right? Like Nancy said, maybe get in the habit of doing it every month. You might have your own method of keeping track of your finances and keeping track of possible suspicious activity. And if you have other suggestions for folks or things that work for you, please put them in the chat or share with us. Because in this community, we got to look out for each other, right? And so if you have a habit that you're in, or maybe if you have a certain setting or thing that you have with your credit card that kind of alerts you of stuff, let us know, because there are lots of tools out there that can help. Fortunately, some banks and credit card companies are pretty good at notifying you if there's something weird going on. It's always funny when maybe you like make an odd purchase, or like you're on vacation and they message you and they're like, something weird is happening. And you're like, no, I'm just in Mexico buying souvenirs. I really am. But sometimes you might get something like that and you're able to contact them right away and say, you're right, this is not me. Sometimes we can rely on those things, and those are great tools, but it's also important for us to make sure we're checking. And this also includes checking your credit score. I'm sure most of you know, but if you don't, I can let you know of the resources you can use. but there are very specific websites that folks can use to check their credit score, right? It's something like you can only do it either once a year or 2 times a year. But it's important to use those ones that are trusted through websites like the FTC, right? The Federal Trade Commission, or the FBI. And I can put those in the chat towards the end, but I'm sure most of you are already pretty aware of them. But regularly checking your credit score on those secure, well-known sites is important too, because if you notice that something is up with your credit score, you may not have checked it on your bank accounts, but if something's weird with your credit score, that's also an indicator that something fishy is happening. Okay, next is be careful when clicking links. And again, some of these might feel obvious to some people, but I, for one, need this reminder as well, because identity theft has formed into a very tech-savvy crime where sometimes the way that people either hack into folks' computers, get their personal information, or simply like continue the cycle of like tricking other folks, right? Maybe like tricking people into buying things, or just clicking a link so that their computer gets hacked. You want to be really careful when clicking links, especially ones that are sent to you through social media or through email. And so this doesn't mean that you have to be extremely suspicious about any link that anyone sends you. What this means is that you just simply want to kind of double check. You want to stop and think before clicking. A great example actually happened to me very recently. An extended family member messaged me on Facebook, probably like a couple weeks ago, and it said something along the lines of, "You'll never believe this picture I just found of you," and a link. And at first I was like, oh man, what picture did Aunt June find of me? This sounds like it's going to be like something embarrassing from when I was little, right? So I almost clicked it. And then I thought, why would Aunt June send me a link instead of just texting me the picture? And so I sent to her, I texted her back and I said, should I trust this link? And sure enough, she messaged me back on Facebook and said, nope, got hacked. And so second guessing and thinking before you click a link really can save you in those small moments like that, right? The link might not have been detrimental, but it probably would have hacked my Facebook. I would have had to change my password, right? It could have gotten bad. And so even just thinking before you click these links can be good. And Julia says, if you see something on Facebook and you like it, is that a problem? Julia, that's a good question. No, I don't think that that's a problem. Obviously, there are a lot of different opinions on ways that, like, maybe if you like something on Facebook, the algorithm might send you more of that, right? And if you don't like that, then maybe you refrain from interacting with things. I, for one, still like stuff on Facebook all the time. What you really need to keep an eye out for that might be a problem is if you see a post and it's encouraging you to do something that seems out of the ordinary. Right. So somebody might post on Facebook and be like, I'm raising money for this really cool organization. Check out the link below if you want to know more, and message me if you want to learn more. To me, that sounds pretty normal, right? I'd be like, okay, cool. My friend's raising money. But if my friend, who rarely posts on Facebook, suddenly posts something and says, check out these cool sunglasses that are going on sale, and it's a link. Sometimes you can use your context clues to think, this seems kind of out of the ordinary. It's kind of a little bit weird. Maybe I want to talk to this person before I interact with the post. Liking it might not do much, but if you click the link, sometimes those links can just be ways that people's accounts get hacked. If a person with some type of security on their computer would they catch the string link? There are some softwares that you can put on your computer that can catch sort of like suspicious activity. I think that they could tend to be expensive, the better they are. There's different type of security things that people buy for their computers. It really depends on what you're looking for. And so again, I am so happy to talk with folks. I'll give you my email after this. I'm so happy to talk you through these things. But it would just require me to do a little bit more research for you. But I would say typically it's okay to like things on Facebook, but if you see something that's weird, try not to click the link because links can sometimes lead to hacking. Okay. Let's go ahead and move on. Oh, and before I move on, I will tell you that I've clicked the link before. I've had my account hacked like that. All I've done is change my password and let people know not to click a link if it sends them a message, right? Because that's what happens. If I clicked a link, it might start hacking my Instagram and sending it to other people. Really, the way that I got out of that was just changing my password. And so I don't want you to be scared and think that these things could be super detrimental, because sometimes there are fixes. But of course, we want to err on the side of a lot of caution, especially after seeing the number of people who might become victim to this. All right, so it certainly isn't the final way that you can minimize the risk, but another really important way is to know about common phishing scams. Phishing scams is just a fancy word for ways that people try and reel you in. I don't know if that's why they call it a phishing scam, because it's not phishing with an F. But to me, it stands for a scam where someone is trying to reel you in to get more information or to get you to buy stuff, send the money, things like that. Being aware of scams and of common signs of scams, in my opinion, is one of the most important things that I've been able to do to equip myself to look out for them. And I think it's important for you all to know as well, because once you know these signs, like Julie is saying, if you see something on Facebook and you don't know if it's a problem or not, understanding the signs of common scams can sometimes help you identify that a little bit easier. So let's talk about some of the signs. These come from the Federal Trade Commission. And so I'm going to go through them, but I'll talk about them a little bit as well. The first sign that something is a scam or that something is just a little bit fishy is that scammers pretend to be an organization you know. Of course, you might not always know this because they are pretending, and sometimes it is convincing. But a lot of times scammers will act like they're an organization or someone that you know. Like we heard earlier from someone in the chat, they may have gotten an email that is acting like they're someone from FedEx, or pretending like they're someone from Microsoft Teams or from Apple or from Amazon. This can be hard to tell, right? Because their email might be really similar. That is when I want you to use the next 3 signs to try and discern, is this weird or is this real? Okay. But one way that you can sometimes tell if someone is pretending is by, like I said earlier with my CEO, thinking, is this how this person normally talks? Is this how they normally communicate with me? Somebody who always emails me is suddenly trying to call my phone. This is odd, right? Stuff like that. But the next 3 are very important. Number 2, scammers say that there is a problem or that there is a prize. Okay. Oftentimes there might be a problem, like something went wrong with your online order, or they might even be trying to tell you that there's a problem with your account and that is being hacked or compromised. That's something that often gets people thinking, oh my goodness, I don't want to be hacked. So let me see what this is talking about. Sometimes they will say the problem is your computer has been hacked. Maybe the problem is something with your finances. Unfortunately, folks will use accounts that pretend to be the IRS to tell you there's a problem and we need you to fix it right away. Or there's a prize. They might say, you won a lot of money. You won a contest that you didn't even sign up for, but guess what? You still won, right? There might be these grand prizes that are really enticing to us. Or it might just be like, there's a problem with your package. We need you to check on this delivery date, things like that. The next way that you could tell, okay, this seems like it's FedEx. They say there's a problem with my order. How do I know if it's a scam? Number 3 is that scammers will pressure you to act immediately. And this immediacy is a very clear sign that something is off. Okay, so for example, with that FedEx example, they might be saying, you need to click this link immediately and send us your information, or else something's going to happen. Or like I mentioned before, our CEO would never ask us to immediately go to Giant and buy a gift card, but that immediacy can really make people feel vulnerable. And so thinking to yourself, or I might think to myself, okay, why is this person in a crisis? Why is this person acting like I need to do something automatically? A common one, like I said, is people might get a message from the IRS saying you need to act immediately. Something is wrong with your account or you owe us money. We need you to act immediately. And guess what? The IRS has said multiple times, you will never be blindsided by the IRS. They will call you, they will send you a million pieces of mail. It will never be something where they tell you one time, this is immediate. You'll get a lot of notices. Okay. There was a webinar where a woman from the IRS was like, you will hear from us, don't you worry, right? And sometimes the immediacy comes with a lot of defensiveness, right? If you say, well, I don't understand why you need this right away. People like FedEx, people like the IRS, people like customer service at Amazon will have no problem explaining to you very calmly and slowly what's going on. If someone is acting immediately and telling you, you need to do this now, you might want to think to yourself, something might be off here. Okay, lastly, scammers will tell you to pay in a very specific way. And scammers have gotten very, again, tech savvy with how they're collecting money from folks. And they do it specifically in ways that can't easily be traced back. For example, I told you that example with buying gift cards. That's one that often goes around where people will say, I need you to go out and buy gift cards for me. That is because giving someone the number of a gift card over the phone or over text message makes it so that it's harder for them to be traced back, right? It's harder for that person to be held accountable. They also might ask folks to pay in ways like Venmo or PayPal or Cash App, but also it's very common for them to bring up things like cryptocurrency. Right, so if you've heard of things like Bitcoin and those different ways that I still don't really understand of how people are exchanging money online, scammers are frequently using things like Bitcoin because, again, it's harder to be traced. And so these individual warning signs might not seem like screaming red flags, but all of them together give you a better clue of, is this real or is this not? Okay. And so if there's a problem, they need you to act immediately, or they want you to claim a prize immediately and pay them in a very specific way. The things that you can do are, one, slow down. Okay. Do not give into that immediacy. Instead, take time to think. Take time to let your brain wheels turn. Is this a scam or not? Once you've slowed down, another thing that you can do is you can cross-check references. Again, back to the example of my coworker. When they had a small inkling that something wasn't right, what they did is they cross-checked by texting our CEO and saying, I got this weird email from you. Is this you? Right? Or other times, if someone sends you a link and you're not sure if it's legit, you could type that link into Google instead, right? Instead of just clicking on it. Or you can message that person directly and just say, hey, I recently saw a program about scams, so I'm a little bit on edge. Is this legit? Those are some ways that you can kind of connect directly to that person or try and cross-check what's going on. But another really important thing you can do, other than slowing down and checking other sources, is to get a second opinion. And this is something that I have done before as well, where something didn't seem right. And I asked my mom, what do you think about this? Or I sent a screenshot, or I called up my friend and I said, do you think this is legit? Oftentimes those are moments when someone who isn't so swept up in the immediacy or the vulnerability can say to you, oh my goodness, no, that is totally fake. Do not click that. And you're like, what? Are you serious? It seems really real. And they're like, no, don't do it. A lot of times having a second pair of eyes on something can really help minimize the risk of us getting ourselves into some sort of deeper hole of identity theft. Okay, so those are a lot of different tools. I hope that it doesn't feel super overwhelming, because really what I want you to know is that knowledge is power, right? And so continue to learn about common scams going on, continue to talk to each other about it, teach people in your life. But also just know it's always okay to slow down, to double think things, to get other people in on it and ask them their opinion. Okay, last thing I want to leave you with are some resources. These aren't just resources for victims, they're also resources for you if you want to continue learning about this. Okay, so identitytheft.gov, that is from the Federal Trade Commission. This is an awesome website, and I can send these to Mark as well, and he can send them out to you all if you would rather it that way. Identitytheft.gov is one of those places, like I mentioned, where that data comes from, because people can report identity theft through this website. Unfortunately, reporting does not always mean that something will turn into a police report or that something will go to court. Sometimes it just means that you are adding to the data to help fight identity theft, right? And so reporting doesn't really mean anything other than you're letting them know, hey, I have this problem. And what they then do is give you a lot of steps for your specific issue going on what to do next. It's very cool. I tried it myself with a fake scenario where I was, when I was looking for resources for you all, I was trying to find good ones. And I was able to type this one in, like, my credit card got stolen. It instantly gave me a list of steps to do right now and steps to do in the future. And so it was like, call your bank, try and cancel your credit card, all of these different things that I could do right now. But then it also gives you resources for the future. So like, how can you keep your credit a little bit safer? Or what can you do if this happens again? So I really liked that one, because I feel like if something like that happened to me, I would be like, oh my gosh, what do I do? This website will tell you. Also, the PA office for the Attorney General, the Commonwealth of PA, also has a lot of information on identity theft. And that website is attorneygeneral.gov. That is where that information is. And it gives you different resources to further your knowledge on protecting yourself. Again, I'll send all these links over to Mark when we're finished. But then on the right are some local Chester County resources I also wanted you to know about. There's the Senior Law Center that offers free legal help to seniors who are dealing with a bunch of different things. One of those things might be financial exploitation. And so they're a good person to call to see if they could help you out if something like this happened to you. Also, the Department of Aging, they work through the PA Protective Services, where they also help folks who are seniors who might have been impacted by this. But like I said, this is not just a problem that seniors or older populations need to deal with. This is something that everyone might need help with. And so I also put up Crime Victim Center information. Of course, you can always reach out to us on our hotline if something like this happens. I've personally talked with quite a few clients on the hotline about this stuff. And we're a very good listening ear. We're very good people to vent to and rant to when this happens. But we're also really good at connecting people with resources that can help them. And so sometimes we take on clients ourselves who are victims of identity theft. Other times we connect them with people who can better help their specific situation. And then lastly, I included United Way, which has a hotline that's 211. They don't specifically deal with identity theft, but they're a cool community resource that people can call to get connected with other resources. And so instead of looking up online different resources, you can call 211 and they'll help you find out what resources exist in our county, because there are a lot and it is confusing and it's hard for me to remember. And so 211 is also a cool resource. So like I said, I'll send all this over to Mark. I want to leave you on a lighthearted note. I found this funny GIF from The Office where Dwight is saying, identity theft is not a joke, Jim. Millions of families suffer every year. And that is true. We learned that. But I wanted to leave you on a lighthearted note again. Thank you so much for being here. I included my email address and our website. You can also find us on social media, but I do want to leave some time at the end. If anyone has any questions or wants to reach out to me further and chat more about this stuff, I know we covered a whole lot, and I want you to know you can always reach out to me and we can continue this conversation. All right, so I'll leave some room for questions if we have any.
Thanks so much, Grace. You really did learn a lot when you put this together, didn't you?
I really did. I really did.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. And it's great to know that organizations like you guys are there for people, or to lend an ear and offer that support. And I also wanted to thank you for a comment you made earlier about saying that people who have been victims of identity theft and scams shouldn't feel guilty about that, because it's just so easy to feel that way.
It is. It's easy to feel that way.
Sure, yeah. I did have a question though that I was interested in. Have you found are there any commonalities, common demographics among the perpetrators of identity theft and scams, like particularly computer or phone scams?
That's a great question. I didn't find anything when I was doing my recent research, but in my personal life, I've also kind of taken an interest in, like, how does this happen? Because it's a very big market, right? Obviously, a lot of money is lost. That means a lot of money is being gained. There are, of course, people who do this, like in our county, in our neighborhoods, who know us. There's also a big market for it in different countries. And so sometimes it's people who are not even in the United States, which is why it is really hard to track back the perpetrators. I don't have statistics, but I do know that I've heard many different cases. Sometimes people have no idea who these people are. And I bet that the information we have on it is a bit skewed because it is so hard to track these folks. But unfortunately, no, I don't have a lot of information about the demographics of them. But I do know that it's all over the place.
Anyone for Grace? Any other questions, comments?
I have a question. Thank you so much for this program. I have a rather unusual name, and there's only two of my name in the country that I'm aware of. One here, which is me, and one in California. But recently, like, I Google my name every so often just to see, what I'm up to in the social world. I'm not on any social media, so I like to see if there's anything out there about me. Mm-hmm. And so I found my name is associated with a home in Delaware County. I've never lived there, and I'm kind of wondering how concerned I should be about that and what resource I might be able to use to see if somebody is using my name and doesn't really have that name, or maybe there is another person out there with that name and I'm just not aware of it.
That's a good question and a very interesting example. Nancy says I've seen that too.
Okay, so
I think you muted yourself. I don't know if you had more to say, but
oh yeah, I said maybe it's more common than I realized, so that's good.
Yeah, that could be. My personal advice, as Grace telling you this right now off the top of my head, is if you were getting things like odd stuff in the mail or through your email, or finding that you have some sort of weird attachment to other properties or things like that, then I would be concerned, and we could talk about places you could reach out to. But if this is just simply something that you saw online, I think the real concern would be if you started to, like, in your own life, have like mail appear at your house talking about different things in Delaware County when you don't live there, or Delaware, whatever it was. That's when I think that I would tell you to start to reach out to people, be concerned. But that's something that I can also bring to my team, who's been dealing with stuff like this for longer than I have, and see what they think, and I can get back to you.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, sure. If you want to, you can message me like your email
Okay,
if you want.
thank
But
you.
yeah, I'll ask around about that. It's a good question. My mom also has an uncommon name and has like been a part of a Facebook group that was like every person with this name. So it's fun, but I'll look into that. Thanks for sharing.
Thank you. And I had one other experience, if you don't mind me sharing this, because I thought it was kind of odd. Last year or two or so, we got a gift at our door, or a box at our door. I think it was Christmas time. And I didn't remember ordering this item. Actually, it was, I think before that happened, someone had come into our driveway, and they were on our driveway for a little bit. And I said to my husband, that's weird. What do you think they're doing out there? Should I go out and see, what's going on? And our neighbor has a lot of people coming in and out. I thought maybe they got confused, but they were on our driveway for a really long time, and it seemed odd. And we can't see where they are from our door. So I was just getting ready to like do something, and then the car left. And it was odd. It didn't go to my neighbors. It just went down the street. And I'm like, that's really strange. So then the next day we get this package, which we weren't expecting, and I opened it up. I'm like, little baby boots. This is weird. I didn't order this. So I called the store and told them, and they're like, yeah, it was on your credit card and this and that. So I shipped it back to them. They're like, we'll just put it at, in your front, we can pick it up. And then it hit me. I think they maybe told me that what people will do, local people will order things to your home and then come and pick it up before you get home. And I would not have even known that they were shipping things to my house, but I happened to be home and see the package. So I'm like, oh, I'm not leaving the package in the front. They'll come get it and take it. I'll take it to the post office. That's not right. So then that happened for a few days. I was getting packages. But I didn't realize that they were doing things like that. I'm like, wow, that was really uncomfortable.
Yeah. Yeah. And that sounds uncomfortable. A lot of times this stuff feels like it like hits too close to home, because it really is your home, right? So you're like, this is weird. I think that hearing from the store that it was charged to your credit card, for me, that would send alarm bells to like contact your credit card company and contact your bank, see if anything weird has been going on. I'm glad that you called the store directly too, because that's kind of what I mean by that cross-checking, right? Being like, let me get to the source of this. Let me call the store and see what they can tell me. And so it might even be worth calling them back and being like, this isn't me. I'm not ordering baby boots. But again, if it, we can always email, but if it got to a point where you started to feel like, I don't really know what's what, I need more resources, that's when you could reach out to your local agency. So if you're Chester County, you can reach out to us, but if somewhere else, I can get you with people who you could call and also just kind of explain the situation.
Yeah, I was just mentioning it in case it happens to somebody else.
Yeah,
It
thank
got
you.
resolved, because I didn't know what credit card it was on, because none of the, like, they
Right.
send packages nowadays with no shipping information in them. So they're just packages and you're like, I can't even figure out what credit card it was on, or, what happened. So when I called the store, I guess they were able to check my address or something, but they wouldn't give me a lot of information. Like, whoever ordered it, because I guess they must have given their own email address.
Okay.
So they knew when the package was going to be delivered to me. but I
Mhm.
didn't know when the package was going to be delivered. So
That's interesting. Thank you for sharing that. And that is what I mean by like the knowledge of current trends is powerful, because sometimes we don't even know that stuff is happening until we hear it. Like, I didn't know about that. And now that I know that from you, if I see weird packages, my brain's going to think back, wait, I heard a story about this. Maybe I want to double check. Maybe I want to call some people, check what's going on. So thank you for sharing that. And that's good for all of us to hear.
thank you.
Last thoughts, questions from anyone? If not, Grace, we'll call it a night. Wonderful presentation. Thanks again for sharing with us.
Yeah, thank you all for coming. I learned as much from doing these and from you all that I do, so I'm happy to be in community with you all. It's something we all gotta, look out for each other and support each other. So happy to do
And
it.
yes, feel free to send me the slides and I'll send those out.
I'll send them to you tomorrow and send all those resources.
Thank you. And thanks, Mark, for putting it together.
Welcome. You're welcome. Thanks for joining us tonight, everybody. Stay safe. Have a good night.
Yes.
Thanks, you too. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.